So I'm going to have Mark Chang introduce himself. Mark's one of our faculty members here at Olin, and he's going to introduce the students, and they're going to talk about their experiences with the mobile app development.
Thank you. Good almost afternoon. We're in between you and lunch, so we'll try to keep it as short as possible. Hopefully it'll be as interactive as possible because we really haven't planned a whole lot to say. So I've been running a class for the past 2 years in mobile application development. We'll be running it again this spring. Mostly because of student interest, not because, I have an interest in mobile stuff, but really it's what the students want to learn. So I think that's maybe an interesting set of questions. Why are they interested in this kind of stuff? But I'll let them introduce themselves.
I'm Andy Pedon. I'm a senior here at Olin. I'm majoring in engineering with a concentration in computing. And as far as my interest in mobile goes, one of my biggest things was one, on the programming side, looking to learn more about how you actually go about developing these things. It seems like everyone's talking about how easy it is to develop, but if you can't do it yourself, it doesn't seem so easy. So being able to tackle that barrier. And then on just the idea of starting a business and going through that design process and coming up with an idea that can go somewhere and start generating revenue right away, get to market that quickly, it sounded very appealing. So that's where a lot of my interest came from there.
Hi, my name is Ron Kim. I'm a junior and I'm studying electrical and computer engineering. My interest in mobile lies in the fact that mobile tends to be a field that's fairly new still, and so I'm really interested in that. And in addition to that, I'm really addicted to my phone, so that's probably the other reason.
Hi guys, I'm Noah. I'm a sophomore studying for a major in engineering with a concentration in computing. So in my pockets right now, I have my wallet, so it's some cash and some ID. I have my multi-tool, so I can manipulate physical things, or if there's an emergency, I can do stuff. And then I have a supercomputer which is capable of connecting to a network of other supercomputers all around the world. And the value added by that single artifact is pretty impressive to me, so I think it's important to explore that space.
I'm Miguel, and I'm a junior studying electrical and computer engineering, and I'm interested in mobile development generally because of there's a lot of innovations going on from the user interface aspect of it, and also as Noah was talking about the ubiquitous computing that all my data is going to be synchronized across a lot of devices, and my phone, which I always carry around, contains that data, so it's always accessible to me. I find that really fascinating. So.
Hi everyone, my name's Timothy Ryan. I'm a sophomore. I'm studying to have a degree in engineering with a concentration in computing. And my interest in mobile is doing really powerful thing with really tiny devices, because in a field which hasn't really been developed yet, a newcomer, say a small college student or a small group of college students, can do awesome things and very incredible things.
Hi, my name is Rachel Stedman, and I'm a senior here at Olin, majoring in electrical and computer engineering. And what interests me about mobile is that you get to play with the context a lot more than when dealing with non-mobile devices. When you think about working on your computer, you're one of very few places, home, work, at a coffee shop perhaps, but when you're dealing with mobile, you get to change that context and consider using technology in many different places, the grocery store, working out in the gym, and many other areas. So that's what interests me.
So, anybody have any questions for the panel?
Okay, so you're interested in mobile application development. There's BlackBerry, there's Android, there's Apple. Which platforms are you working on, and which platforms do you think are going to win in the marketplace?
So in our class, we did Android development, which is kind of convenient for a class type setting because you don't need to pay for the SDK or anything. As far as design goes, I feel like they're a pretty consistent set of design type principles. Be translated across platforms. So we in our class we did Android, but I know Tim has done BlackBerry, and I feel like it doesn't really matter that much.
And on top of the three platforms you mentioned, Android, iOS, and Microsoft, there's also the QNX-based BlackBerry tablet platform. There's also Palm OS, which I'm a very big fan of, and I still hope it's going to win one day, WebOS. I have a Palm Pre in my pocket. I'm a big fan. And there's so many platforms, and for some reason, they're still developing new platforms. They still haven't settled with that. And in China, the Android development platform is forked, so you still don't have the Google Android market as the main entranceway into that market. So when you have such a variety of platforms, the main idea is that you're just going to, diversify, level the playing field, being able to develop for all platforms. And that's probably what I think is going to happen going forward, is that a lot of the skills you see specific to mobile platforms are just going to be generalized. Much to Apple's chagrin, they now allow that anyone can develop for their platforms using a language other than Objective-C as long as it compiles down to Apple OS. And so that really opens up for anyone to go and develop, say, cross-platform Flash applications or cross-platform Java applications. And I think that's also really good for students and for low barriers to entry, because people don't want to be able to pay like $100 to get a license developing fee for Apple when they can go to a lower barrier to entry platform. So I think more OS developers are probably going to target being able to get the people who have these skills, which are transitive across platforms.
Just a question for the group that relates to what we just talked about. How do each of you feel about the security of the data on your mobile device? And what do you do about it?
Somebody has to go first.
You have to.
All right. On a personal level, I guess I don't have a whole lot of enormously private data on there. Things usually because it's a physical device that I carry around and I feel like I can physically lose it all the time, I almost assume that anything on there, whether it be text messages or my contacts, almost have to be semi-public. I can't treat anything as truly confidential because even with all of the protection in the world, the odds of it getting left behind and unlocked is not too unlikely at all. So that's more of a personal thing. I know a lot of friends generally have the feeling of treating computers very differently than phones. It seems like computers are a lot more locked down than a phone. And that might have just been how we grew up using each of them separately. But even data on computers, I know, compared to my parents who are very protective of a lot of things, worried about security all the time, I know that I let a lot of information out there pretty openly. So.
You can keep talking about that question.
All right.
Let's tell us what devices you use, too, so we can kind of
Well,
do our own little survey.
Okay, so I'm currently using a BlackBerry, and any of you who use BlackBerries know that they have like the password protection, and after that, like it automatically deletes everything if you incorrectly guess a certain number of times. And so because of that, it auto wipes everything, and I don't know exactly why they do that, but I'm sure it's for a corporate reason. And so because of that, I partially feel very secure about my data on that because of that, the local data, and having someone physically take my BlackBerry and manipulate or take information from there. But the other end of it is I do find that everything that you put out in like the web and things like that are very public. And so I treat my phone just like I would treat any other information that I put out into the web. So with like Facebook, I know all my contacts are out open for anyone else to see. And I treat like my phone and my address book as the same way.
Do you guys differentiate between specific applications built for a particular platform, like the operating systems we were talking about, or do you see trends in HTML5 on the browser and that type of thing where you can start doing more powerful things and replicating the same functionality you have on the device-specific applications?
So I have a bunch of web background as a web guy, and I really like the idea of HTML5 kind of taking off on the mobile platform. That being said, nobody's really done anything about it yet, and there are a bunch of people actually developing apps for platform-specific apps. Like I hope that in the future it'll all kind of move into HTML5 stuff, but I don't really know if that's going to happen.
So even though I use an iPhone, I'm really an avid fan of like a lot of Google applications, and I really love things like Google Voice. So last year, because of like Apple's closed App Store regulations, which like no one knew about until like a month or so ago, they banned the Google Voice application for the iPhone. So what the people at Google did was create an HTML5 like application that you could get to through your browser to use Google Voice. And I really found that like the HTML5 application just doesn't match like the snappiness and like all the functionality that I would want in a native application. So, I mean, I think that HTML5 is great in the sense that like anyone can access it and really like from any platform, and it'll just work for like whoever needs it. But really, like, I think that it just won't have the same power as like a native application will generally have.
To add to that, you naturally, I think, assume that going to HTML5 might make it easier to develop a cross-platform application. But when you're trying to make sure that it looks good on every single phone, like it belongs on that phone, or the iPad or iPhone or everything, when you take all of the work that it would take to make that application look good and function as if it were a native app on those devices, it's almost just as much work. Over the summer during my internship, one of I was by a team that was working on an application that had to work on like the different generations of Blackberries, and they wanted it on the iPhone and the Android devices, and they did it as a web application, but it was pretty much just as much work as if they had gotten an engineer to develop it for the iPhone and all the other devices individually.
Yeah, and just one last thing is until like all mobile phones actually expose all the functionality of their operating systems to HTML5, then HTML5, despite the numerous enhancements it has, then it's not going to integrate deeply into the phone. I remember trying to do some development just with Palm OS, which is WebOS, which is HTML5 and JavaScript and CSS anyway, as a platform. But if you try to access it from a browser, it's more limited, doesn't have as much graphical capability, and doesn't have access to like the internal microphone, the internal sensors, a lot of things which make mobile applications really immersive, being like the external features of the phone. So once browsers are starting to open up to the internal features of the phone, or perhaps the proprietary features of each operating system, then we'll probably see a movement in that direction. But it hasn't happened yet.
So, pardon me, I'm a venture capitalist, and I'm involved with a local company that produces a platform for developing apps across all those platforms all those operating systems you talked about. So being in that space, I'm curious what you guys think, having developed on the individual platforms. Is there a market for a tool like that? I'd also like to know, again, as a venture capitalist, what your individual applications were, and what you decided after you developed them. Were they good ideas, or with some legs, or just something to do for class?
Well, if I want to start off, Andy, if I may call you out specifically, Andy and I had worked on a team with 3 other students, and we were developing a music visualization application for Android called Slice. It's still available on the Android market. And basically, you log in, you register, you enter in a particular musical artist, then it gives you a graphic visualization of other musical artists which are similar to it, some indicators of how similar they are, how hot the artist is. And using a music API provided by Econest, we were able to go through and see similar artists, start playing them. If you enjoyed them, then you could spawn off to a different mapping of similar artists to that artist, and basically just continually navigate through the musical space based on related people. And specifically to mention cross-platform applications, one of the things we had to do for that application was dig into the OpenGL drivers of Android. And we were targeting the Motorola G1, so technically an older Android phone. But there were a lot of things which we had to do with that application which could not be done in a browser. could probably not have been done in WebGL with the phones that we were targeting, at least at the time. So we had to do a lot of very specific OS development, which would not have been possible through that. So some of the more intense visualizations, some of the more intense resource-heavy things, I don't think are really catered to by cross-platform devices as of yet.
And just to comment on the idea of applications like that, I've used EXTJS, which is a web development thing for lots of different JavaScript. And I know that group, I think they renamed to Sencha, and they're doing similar work in the mobile space. But those kinds of products have, I think, gone a long way for web development. And I know that they're picking up a lot of steam. I've used them. I find them to be really useful. And I think like Tim mentioned, some of the hardware limitations as far as having to go implementation specific. But I think you saw that in early computing too, where a lot of the computers, you would have to do a lot of hacks for every different type of operating system, every piece of hardware almost, to make your program be able to do the things you wanted it to. But as the processors get a little faster, these frameworks can be inefficient in some ways and still get you the type of things that you want, make it easier to develop. So I don't think it's quite there, as Tim mentioned, but it's an emerging market.
So kind of along those lines, I think you can only go so far developing for one platform and creating an application that's just for your phone. So the application that I created when I was in the mobile development course with two others was called What's for Dinner, and we focused on combining the creating grocery list functionality with searching for recipes functionality. And the idea was to facilitate meal planning on the go, or when you're in the grocery store and you see that chicken's on sale and you're not an experienced cook, so you're like, okay, well, what can I make with chicken? I want to get it. It's on sale. You can, pull out your phone and search for recipes involving chicken and then add those ingredients directly to your grocery list. And when we released our application, many of the comments that we received from users was that they wanted a better recipe. They wanted better recipes. They wanted recipes that were vegetarian or more specific to their needs. And that was the greatest challenge that we ran into when developing our application, because we didn't have a recipe database. We had to use what was available. Epicurious wasn't going to let us, some random 3 college students, use their wonderful database of recipes, and so we had to go out and find like a crowdsourced recipe website that we could just scrape. And so the quality of our recipes, and therefore the quality of our phone application, was limited by the resources we had available. And next semester, Mark is going to teach a course that combines like web applications with the phone development, because it kind of surrounding this concept of you need more than just the application.
So, we often hear people talk about, cell phones and smart devices as the third screen, but that's, demographically oriented. For you guys, it's first or second screen, it's first or second phone, it's first web, first email application. So the question is, given the demographics of the adopters of mobile technology, especially the over 30s in this room, for example, how do you design for the demographics of failing eyesight, arthritis in our hands, and so what are some of the user interaction and human interface and engineering usability factors that are in consideration for mobile development?
You asking if they ever think about us old?
Yeah, don't be selfish. Yeah, one day you will get older.
Well, actually, as an anecdote, my mom's an avid emailer on her phone, and she did this like years before even I got a phone or got a smartphone and was able to surf the internet on it. So I was shocked by it, and but she's using Windows Mobile Phone 6, so she's not really like, so clearly like she can even compensate with a really bad UI. It just increased the font size, and she's happy with it. I'm trying to convince her to switch to at least a BlackBerry, but she seems content. But in addressing that, yeah, I think actually mobile is a really good space for innovating and like being able to develop applications which can conform to the needs of the user, because mobile devices are inherently incredibly personal, and that's why they're an enhancement over. That's why it's a completely different market than computers. And having a mobile device and having it know a lot of information about you, it can also tailor to those needs. So if it's aware that a system-wide level setting is like you have an increased font size, that you want things to be much easier to click, a higher latency for clicking things, a higher latency for navigating through things. And I think that it is the developer's responsibility to be able to say, okay, we can make this easier, simpler, more intuitive, all things which are a great benefit on the mobile platform, which might get blown over on a computer platform simply because you have more screen real estate or more computing power. That a mobile platform really makes it a better venue for this. I haven't really thought much beyond that, but I think that if anything is going to increase the ability of bringing computing to people who are an older generation or unfamiliar with the technology, that it's mobile and that it's tablets.
I'm taking a class called Human Factors in Interface Design, which is basically about making like software interfaces really easy for everyone. And one of the interesting things that I found, differences that I found between like the mobile sort of market and then the like desktop sort of market, is that mobile, as it's moving like a little bit more towards touch, it's making things a lot easier for like for anyone to really use. So whereas like the mouse and the keyboard to me are like very like sort of unnatural ways to like interface with software, I think that touch is something that's very, very natural. And like the easier that you make it for like, let's say if I'm designing like a mobile application, I want to make it like easy for someone over the age of like 60 or 70 to use. So I have to have like large text, big buttons, and just make everything like very explicit. Then I'm really making it easier for anyone to use. So I just think that like having I just think that having the like that you really like looking at how like someone who might not be as technologically adept and how they are going to use your application can really make the application better for everyone. So I think that when you're designing a mobile application, really like what you should be targeting is like how easy it's going to be for someone who isn't really into technology or really feels uncomfortable with like the medium to use the application.
I think one of the challenges is that in speaking to a lot of designers of kind of computing systems, the only metaphor, and physical systems, the only metaphor they have is make the buttons bigger and make the text bigger. And I think that treats people kind of in an inappropriate fashion, that somehow you need a device that's dumbed down. In the research that I've done in the past for building products very specifically for intergenerational gap communication, so like grandparents and much older grandparents, people that are in assisted living facilities, to communicate with their grandkids or great-grandkids, their enthusiasm for adopting technology is no less than young people. They all want the iPhone. They all know what it is. They all want it. They have the same level of desire. And I think what I've heard in a lot of our interviews is their perception of how hard it is to learn to use is the barrier to entry. And so they are, well, I want the iPhone real bad because I know exactly what it does. I can do these things on it. So there's no kind of ambiguous idea of how awesome it might be, but the thoughts are, this is going to be hard for me to get to use. So I'm going to have to bother people. I'm going to be in the store all the time. And you know what? That's not worth it. I'm going to wait till something better comes along, or wait till my grandkids become, or my IT support. So when they bring it in and I get more time with them, then I'll do it. But I think it's that perceived learning curve. So that may just be partly a marketing issue, but also because I don't believe any designers treat that demographic either individually or inclusively in their design process. And so there is no language that says this is an inclusive product. The language you see is kind of, the branding you see is for a very particular demographic, and that's not by accident, right? Those are the people with disposable income and are, you know, more swayed by fad and fashion, and so you're going to target those people with your design as well as your marketing. And so I think it just pushes a lot of the senior demographic into, well, it's not for me, and that means it's going to be hard, which may not be correct.
Are there other attributes you've come across besides the size of the keys? And one of the things that I've heard anecdotally from a lot of colleagues is that the iPad is great for an older person because it does one thing at a time. And when you close something, you know, I mean, the concept, the metaphor is I've closed it, I'm done with that now, and that some of the others were more confusing. You closed it and it really wasn't closed. How about things like that?
I think that is a powerful metaphor. For a lot of power users, it has been a complaint, right? Like, I can't do lots of things at the same time. But if you look at some of the literature, it's moving toward you are able to focus, right? So there's a kind of atmosphere of this generation, I point at these people as, you know, inherent multitaskers. There is a recent study that multitasking is not more efficient. It just makes you think you're more efficient. And there's perhaps some people that are better at it and some people that are worse at it, but everybody attempts to do it when they're around this age. So I think that some new information coming out about like iPad, especially, is that single tasking actually makes people more effective because you can't do anything but email. Like, there's no web on the side or anything. It's just you only have email and you can't do anything but interact with it. And so I think that, again, works for everybody, right? So it works for people that are, you know, kind of all ADD, and it works for people that don't understand what the concept of closing and opening or multitasking means. And so I think Steve Jobs' design metaphor of one thing at a time works. It works in this case more by accident, I think, than anything else. But I think it again, as Miguel said, it works for everybody, not just a particular demographic that doesn't understand that there's multitasking. Even the people that understand multitasking at the very lowest level can reap benefits from having to focus on one particular thing at a time.
Well, from a design perspective, I think people are too stuck in this paradigm with the keyboard and the bigger buttons, as you say. And I'm wondering, are you taking a look at maybe speech recognition, natural language interpretation, and more of a completely different paradigm? Unfortunately, people are like lemmings. We all focus on one thing. Everybody goes, you know, now it's all social software, so everybody goes this way. And then you have that old design paradigm, and AI's been out there for many years, hasn't really gone anywhere, but maybe it's time to take another look at that.
I totally agree with you. Personally, I don't yet have the expertise to make an application with kind of a radically different user interface, whether it be some like really clever machine learning menu type thing or speech recognition or something. But that's why I'm still in school, right? So one of the coolest things about Mozilla Firefox ever since version 3, I think, is that they have this the location bar actually searches a whole bunch of different things, not just the address, and you can type like a couple random characters from a URL or title, and it'll pick that out for you based on things like history and how long you spent on the site and how often you went. And I feel like there's a lot of, somebody was talking about earlier how the mobile platform is a really personal platform, right? I have my phone, this is my phone, and as such, it has a lot of potential for customization toward the specific user. I feel like that's really not being used at all. But yeah, you bring up a good point.
Another point, other than just like bigger buttons that we've been fairly focused on, and maybe even more than just speak recognition, is the fact that a lot of things are now looking a lot more like they actually are. Like notepads inside your phone actually look more like notepads, and that's something that like our team and the same human factors of interface design course is looking into, because this idea that it is something that you're expecting it, and the normal real world object looks like your phone application, makes it a lot more accessible to older generations and to generations who aren't used to just seeing a white screen and expecting that that's what you're supposed to type into. If it looks more like a notepad, then it should be a notepad and it's more intuitive, and that's something that we're looking into.
So recently I saw a TED Talk by a grad student about his PhD thesis, and his main message was we have this trend of people becoming more technological, but he proposed that instead of going that direction, we should be making technology more human. And I think there's something powerful in that, and I think that speech-to-text recognition will have a role in making technology more human.
So, with every new technology that's come out, there are some things that need to be figured out. Business model, security that we just talked about. There's technology. There's the user experience. And with the other technologies like internet and client server, Thornton and I both benefited from being at a place where consulting companies were created to address that. And Mary Meeker, who was the person who sort of predicted the growth of the internet, is now saying mobile apps are going to be 5 times greater than that. So, but with any of those explosions, there comes a time where all those answers start to get figured out, and there are standard approaches that make all those questions that you need to answer initially easier and easier to answer because you're answering them in a standard way. And as that starts to happen, the consulting companies that were formed in the beginning of that cycle end up getting clobbered. And I know a lot of people now who are looking at starting consulting companies around this area. So I'm just wondering where mobile apps are along that curve, or is it still at the you need smart people to figure out how to solve those problems kind of stage, or is it evolved to anybody with a standard toolkit and can do it in a day? Where do you see that today, and where do you see it going in the near term?
Well, I mean, when I look at like mobile application development, which I was, well, like when I was like graduating from high school is when this like huge gold rush started, where like first. That was 2 years ago. Right. Yeah.
And the broad scheme of things,
no.
Large, reptiles walk the earth 2 years ago.
Right. So I mean, like, well, what I was trying to say was that like I was around to like see it all, and I was like sort of, it was the first like sort of major transition in computing that I was around to like really notice. And what like reading about it, it was like, so the first, when the App Store opened up for like the iPhone, like whoever, well, like Mark Chang jokes around in his class, like the guy who made the first fart app became like a millionaire, or like stuff like that. So it was like this great like thing that like anyone who just made one would be rich. And then as time went on, like really, so people started getting this perception that like making a mobile application was like a way to make a lot of money. But as like everyone started to make mobile applications, like there was like 99% of the developers who saw very little profit, and then like the 1% who had like a really innovative idea made a lot of profit. So I think people, like the mobile market is really maturing from that, and now there's going to be a lot of space for like businesses as opposed to like individual developers to like create applications which add value for their users. For example, like with Intuit, like the Mint application, like there's just a lot of ways for like large companies now that are trying to like really reach out to the consumer through mobile applications to like add value and functionality. So I think that like as far as consulting goes, I think that this might be like a really good time to like jump in on that, because like the focus of the market is shifting from like single developers or like a small garage team like creating an application, making a lot of money, for like to now it's the opportunity for like big businesses and companies to really like use the mobile platform in order to like better interface with their users and add value and functionality for them.
On some levels, I think it's I actually would say that it's kind of a race to the bottom on Apple's platforms, because a lot of people would not be interested in buying an application if it were more than $1. And what amount of development time is worth $1 for an application to be sold for that much? Meanwhile, you have on BlackBerry, where there's a scarcity of applications. You can sell things for $6, $10, and you can make a lot more money off of that. So I think the short gold rush of where a developer can go say, I have an idea and I'm going to market it and I'm going to sell for $1. I'm going to make a lot of money off of that, is somewhat coming to a close, and that as more applications get on the market and as more applications go to free, that there's less of a business opportunity there. So if you look at the video game market, video games back in the 1980s, you could have a small group of 1, 2, 3 people developing a video game, sell it for $40 and be able to make money off of that. But nowadays, when you have on the major console markets, you have to have huge studios go ahead and make very large games, which take months, if not years, of development time and actually release those to market. But you still have independent developers who will release the occasional, Angry Birds or the occasional like small application for the Wii, which is much smaller scope, but still attracts everyone's attention. So as more and more major companies and more development time gets poured into it, then there will be areas for smaller developers to go ahead and say, yeah, I have this novel idea. It won't take years of manpower in order to develop it, and I can focus my time and effort on that and make a killing. That is going to be possible, but it's going to be a lot harder because people are going to be expecting fireworks, and they're going to be expecting a huge movie production, which I think is unfortunate because it's right now it's a really good time, a really interesting time to be able to say a small group of students can go ahead and make something interesting and sell it and become popular. But I'm not hopeful for the future that that's going to be able to keep up forever. On the other tack, like you said, that the internet has been sort of solved to have client-server model, to have a standard model on that. But now we're just seeing the release of web app stores by Google Chrome apps. And that's a completely different market, which no one has figured out yet. So perhaps taking the mobile methodology and applying it to web is the next big problem to solve.
I think if I were going to be a predictor of anything, it would be reasonable to say that you could look at previous industries, obviously, because the expansion and contraction of industry, the cyclical nature of these kinds of almost any industry are going to play out somewhere along the line of mobile. So I think right now we are more in the music industry circa 1995 kind of approach, right? So there's lots of big, some small, but the gold rush is over. We may be moving later into the game industry, which is very cyclic as well. So you have the big Xbox, Bungie, and then you have small developers, because as gaming becomes more pervasive, you have casual gaming that's seriously taken off in terms of a market and a kind of hours spent. So like Flash games and those kinds of things have a huge revenue source now. And so once I think the community understands that this is something that everybody does, then there are more niche markets can pop up. And as long as there's enough volume somewhere, you can still make money. So I think I would look toward what did the music industry do? Because right now we're in the one-hit wonder kind of approach, and you have the conglomerates churning out lots of apps. You've got some small places that churn out real high-quality apps, and you have just kind of individual studios churning out small apps. Then you can look at the publishing industry, and you can look at the game industry. So if I were forecasting, I would definitely look at what we've learned from those industries, because this one's has the same people in it, right? Same kinds of entrepreneurs, same kind of technologists, same kind of creative content. So they mirror each other, I think, to a degree.
A lot of the organizations that I work with, and for those of you that are in large enterprises, tell me if you're pursuing this, but there's great interest in enterprises to adopt the App Store model, but for enterprise application development. So we want to be able to provision out an SDK, have developers access to a sandbox where they can do development tests, provision the app, instantly put it on a catalog, and consumers can then get the experience of browsing, downloading, and getting the instant gratification of a new application. So we're trying to adopt some of those concepts in large enterprises, intelligence agencies, DoD organizations, and the question for you is, based on where you're sitting, what do you think the enterprise is looking for? Is it the speed to market with an app? Is it the ease of development for the developer community? What are the benefits that you think the enterprises can get from the App Store model? Or are they just misunderstanding the App Store model altogether, and they shouldn't think that way?
I don't think I totally understand. Are you saying take the App Store kind of experience and translate that to other platforms?
Well, let's who's looking at App Store? Is any of these end user organizations looking at that from an application development perspective?
Yeah, we're considering whether or not we want to have our own App Store versus leverage Apple's App Store. So we are considering that.
And for what reasons?
So we have our own applications that we've certified, and we have some control so that our employees or physicians or nurses know when they come to our App Store, these are applications that we've developed, that we've certified, that we wish them to use, rather than going to an external App Store. So it provides a layer for us of assurance, if you will, quality assurance on the application that we provide to our people.
Dick, isn't there also a user experience issue there? Because you know, IT is always, a lot of us are in the IT world, and IT, you know, CIOs have not been overly loved by society, right? And so, like, you know, and so now because of the work, your good work, thank you so very much. I mean, now, you know, they go to the App Store and they push a button and they get their download, and when we try and take it, you know, to the 8.5 million members at Kaiser Permanente, right? You know, there's this forced march with the smell of burning flesh in the background to try and get people to use the application, right? So it's a fundamentally different experience. So it's like you have raised the bar for us in corporate America to try and make sure that, like, getting the application or the computational functionality they want is not a painful experience.
Yeah, and which benefit of the App Store model are you going after? You know, is it the, you know, just having a broad catalog for the end user? So how does the mobile development paradigm translate to the enterprise development paradigm?
And just one quick clarifying question. Is this for a corporation looking to distribute it to customers, your app, or is it more of for your employees?
Yes and yes. Both.
Okay. On the for employee side, I know this summer when I was working, a lot of add-ons. I was working with IBM, and a lot of add-ons for notes. If you're looking to do plugins, things like that. Every employee, I think, wants to save time when they're working. And so as long as there's an easy way to say, oh, this thing is relevant for me, this thing will save me time or make my job easier, of course I want it. It's not, usually you don't have to force that on people. So it's more of making it available so that they can make the choice to say, I think this will help me work better. I want to pull this down. And so in that sense, it can be good. As far as if you're a company looking to distribute an app to customers, it depends on what kind of customer it is. If it's more consumer-based, I think going with a larger, like an Apple App Store type of place is where they're going to search for it. It's where they're going to expect to find it. They're not going to go to your website /apps/ whatever to look for things. But as far as if you're giving it to, if you're selling to a small number of corporations and you want them to know that security is taken care of, I know a lot of CIOs would rather point their employees at a very specific place where they can trust the app instead of saying, oh, search and hopefully you'll find the right one. I would imagine. So.
And the other main benefit that I think for developers is the Android market is just a very poorly designed application, very poorly designed space. It pales in comparison even to the Apple market. And I think what developers want most is just exposure. If they're going into an app store, if they want to choose from a variety of app stores, if that's the situation, they want the one that's going to give them the most exposure. And I think that actually private enterprise-based app stores actually have a lot of benefit because they could probably give a lot more exposure to developers than probably the main app store can. And especially in having the authenticity and the authentication, the certification that it's approved by such a organization which you already entrust your data with, that's an additional benefit on top of that. So mainly, you can outdo the Android market pretty easily. You can probably compete with the Apple market as long as you make it lucrative for developers to be able to say you're going to get a shot at being installed on a lot of machines. You're going to have a good shot at being out there and people trusting you.
If you have a large demographic that you're targeting, like the medical industry or physicians, and then if a large organization that is trusted by physicians says, here's our app store, then it seems like that might work. But and especially if you want control over things for your employees, I think that's a reasonable venue. You can, forcibly put it on their phones from IT. You can, you can take away access to the other app store, but I don't know how easy it's not easy to do on the Apple platform. It is very easy to do on an Android platform. You can get all the phones in, you could reflash them, and all they will see is your app store. And so at least it's doable on some of the other platforms. Apple-wise, I don't really think you can do that. I know that I've been in discussions with Apple for government work, like they want their own app store. And so if you looked at any of the DARPA BAAs from last year, they were, help us make an app store. In fact, if you have an app store, tell us how that works, and we will give you some money. And so it was very directed. They are, yeah, they love the direct channel Nexus one, like the idea of a phone that has no contract provider or a carrier associated with it. They love that idea because it's like, oh, it's not an AT&T phone. It's a Google phone. Okay, we can work with Google. I don't want to work with Verizon. And so they want an off-network phone, and they really want their own app store because they want something vetted. And so if that's your goal, is vetted applications, things that are analyzed from a secure perspective, that BAA has, automatic security analysis tools, automatic verification tools as part of the BAA. So I think there's a lot of, if you can take anything from that, they're interested in it for their own employees, for their warfare employees.
So I think the App Store has the potential to be also beneficial in the sense that by giving developers tools to build on top of your main application. For example, Intuit has a new web application store for applications built on top of QuickBase. And so you have, a company may not currently have the resources to implement all of these cool things you could possibly build on top of your main application. And so by opening up an app store, you have developers contributing and adding value to your customer's experience. And maybe you'll have people buying your main application in order to get the benefit of the whole package. Like you're adding value to your main application by introducing an app store.
Which has relevance for OnStar, right? Because you become an app store.
What Rachel said is prescient, right? MBTA launched their the data for the buses that are GPS tracked, I think 2 or 3 days ago. And you go to mbta.com/apps. Right? That was the first thing they launched, right? So I think that's the mentality. The mentality of the end user they're trying to capitalize on. Oh, there's data. I don't know how to do that stuff, but I bet you there's an app for it. And so they go to apps, and you can see them. There's Android one, there's BlackBerry ones, and you can do what Apple has done really well in the past, which is none of these small developers have any sort of IP protection on any of the stuff they do. So you wait till something's popular, then you just copy it, and you put them out of business, which has happened, time and time again with basically every new feature in Mac OS X has been copied from some independent developer who has, then had a blog post on their front page saying, Apple copied me, I'm not out of business, goodbye. So I think there's evil ways to do it, and there's good ways to do it, but as Rachel said, you can figure out what your users want, because among all the millions of users you have, there's got to be one developer that... Not putting them out of business, that's teaching them a value protection and right. Right, you remember those guys that did like the widgets, right? The widget people, the spaces people, every single one of those major innovations in the operating system in the past 4 years has been just outright copied. Yeah, something like that.
Have a nice day.
So it occurred to me that there actually is one space where the App Store model has really been copied well, and that's in gaming. And I realize all of you play video games all the time, but as a quick refresher, there's a couple of stores. Valve does the Steam platform where you can log in and download your games, and then if you go to a different computer, then you can re-download the games again. And there's a couple other companies that do a similar thing, and their motivation is that this way they can kind of manage the DRM and they can manage copy protection type stuff. But it's done in such a way that it does benefit both sides, and so it works because of that.
Actually, another place that I kind of see it is with Google Apps for multiple different platforms, because they have, like, if you go through their website, you can actually get to their BlackBerry and their Android and their iPhone apps for each of their features, like Gmail and Google Voice and things like that. And so that really does help users like know exactly where they can go to get a legitimate source. And so, as you said, that would probably be a great way to do it, even if it is just for a consumer.
Few minutes left. If there's any final questions?
So I'm just interested in all these successes that you've had with various application development. Can anybody talk about the failures that they've had with what didn't work so well?
Yes. So our application idea was that we were going to have a like a note-taking thing that was all voice stuff. So my use case that I was imagining was that I could load an Android phone with my application that would do a voice notes type diary, and I would hand it to Captain Kirk, and then he would be able to, at the end of every episode in like Star Trek, Captain Kirk's like Captain's log, stardate, whatever, right? He would be able to take my application and use the phone with the application I'd given him for his Captain's log, and it was going to be great. And it turned out we hadn't really looked into the platform limitations enough. So, like, in terms of the hardware and the capabilities from the end user type of thing, it's clearly possible that that Android devices would be able to host such an app. It turns out that the way the API is designed with the voice input stuff and the speech recognition is really not designed to facilitate both recording audio and saving the transcription of that same audio at the same time. You usually get one or the other, and it's really hard to do both. So our failure was insufficient research into our platform.
For the app that Tim was talking about, Slice, earlier, one of the areas that you can really innovate in is looking for some new database, almost, because the interfaces are easy to build with the tools, the SDK that's out there, but getting access to a good database. He mentioned the Echo Nest. They have a lot of music data available, and not many application developers are using this yet. So getting in early is really the only way you can really have a good shot at trying to make some money in this space. But when you're getting in early, a lot of things aren't set. We didn't have any contracts. We didn't have anything. When we released our app, we had a music provider, and because we wanted to get things launched so quickly, we didn't have time to go through any of the legal paperwork or stuff like that. And as a result, we have around 1,500 downloads or so, but we haven't received any checks of any kind from the provider that was supposed to pay us on a per download basis. So there's some real issues like that.
The difference between cash and receivables.
It can be. So in some ways, it was really exciting to get it out there, get this many users. But if you're running a business, there's a lot of logistical things that make it a real pain. So.
That said, I had never thought for that team in particular that we would all be in the same email chain that has words like in the recent discussion with Universal Music Group,
right?
Something blah blah blah, and then because of EMI, you guys need to do something, right? So like this is part of the other lesson is don't work with the music industry if at all possible, because they have kind of a ridiculous idea of what it means to make money right now. At least that personally, that's what I think. Let me put a asterisk on that. But the idea is that we never thought, right? On their behalf, I think that the Echo Nest is trying to be that provider to this kind of new marketplace, but they being literally the first application through the gate, and with the provider that we had for the back-end music catalog, which is hard to do in this country. They suffered a lot of kind of setbacks, but I think it was more than the best kind of learning experience, being involved in the discussions with large music labels saying, hey, yeah, you need to pull Lady Gaga off your thing. So, I mean, I never thought that would be an outcome of the class, which is, I think, really fantastic.
Miguel and I had worked on a card game, actually, because we realized that the Android marketplace really didn't have many games. And one of the things that we realized was the reason why there weren't many games were there weren't many platforms or APIs already written so that you could write good games on it. And so I think that that's one of the things that the mobile space really needs to work on, is the fact that in order to develop, there needs to be a lot more infrastructure in the back end of it, and that's not quite as developed yet, at least for the Android development space. And so that's something that we found was really difficult and would have been really nice to have a better version of, I guess is the best way of saying that.
That being said, the game development has never really been something where you have a nice clean set of APIs and just like a framework that's already been written. Like John Carmack didn't have an API when he was writing Doom, just saying.
I think we're out of time, and we'll let you all get to lunch. Thank you very much.